think for a moment about what it would truly mean for everyone in the West Midlands to have the opportunity to thrive, regardless of any disabilities they might experience.
Hmm.
That's the powerful ambition driving the document we've been immersing ourselves in. The Making the West Midlands an Exemplary Region for Disabled People 2024 report.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And right from the start, it's so important for people to understand that this report isn't, a finished product, a set of instant solutions.
Right.
What it actually represents is the very beginning of a really vital and collective journey towards creating genuine and lasting positive change for disabled people right across our region.
That's a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
The West Midlands Combined Authority, or WMCA, which is the regional body bringing together our local councils and other partners, they haven't developed this report in a vacuum, thinking they have all the answers.
No, absolutely not.
They're very clear that achieving this goal of becoming an exemplary region is like putting together a massive jigsaw puzzle. And every single piece of that puzzle needs to be there to complete the picture.
And when we talk about those pieces, we mean everyone, from the largest organizations operating in the region to the smallest grassroots charities working in our communities, and absolutely crucially, individual disabled people themselves.
Yeah.
Everyone has a vital and unique role to play in making this vision a reality.
And it's important to recognize just how broad the definition of disability is in this report. It's not limited to physical impairments, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It includes sensory and mental health conditions, as well as long-term health issues and neurodivergent conditions like autism and ADHD. But the core focus, as the report makes clear, isn't on those individual impairments themselves, but rather on the barriers within society that prevent people from fully participating.
Exactly. It's that social model thinking.
Precisely. It's about understanding and dismantling those obstacles. And to really get a comprehensive view, this report isn't a standalone piece of work. It's underpinned by some really significant supplementary research, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw that.
Things like the Disability Needs Assessment Evidence Base,
Yeah.
the Disabled People's Voice Report from 2024, and specific reports looking at the crucial issue of accessible housing. So really a robust foundation of information.
Absolutely. And from all that in-depth analysis, the data, and particularly the powerful insights shared by disabled people themselves in workshops and through the Disability Working Group, which is a really important collective of individuals and organizations, the report has identified some key opportunities for action. Now, these aren't just abstract ideas floating in the air. They're very much targeted at influencing actual policy decisions, changing how things are done day to day, building those vital support networks.
Yeah.
And perhaps most importantly, really challenging some of the ingrained attitudes and cultures we see in our society and within organizations.
What's fascinating here is the emphasis on nurturing connections. Think about it, getting disabled people actively involved in conversations with organizations, and both of them collaborating more closely with our local authorities. That kind of joined-up approach feels like a really fundamental building block for progress.
It does. And directly linked to these opportunities for action, the report then outlines specific recommendations. These are more practical, concrete steps that have been developed with the direct involvement of the Disability Working Group and various departments within the WMCA.
So it's a starting point, a clear direction of travel, but with the understanding that as we move forward and learn more, new opportunities and perhaps unexpected needs will undoubtedly emerge.
Sure, it's an evolving process.
Exactly. The report really emphasizes that this has to be a collaborative effort, a true partnership, where everyone is working together to create meaningful and lasting change that makes a real difference across the West Midlands. And a point that really stands out is the commitment to not just hear the voices of disabled people, but also to actively explore fair ways of recognizing and rewarding them for their time, their expertise, and their invaluable lived experience.
Okay, so let's delve into some of these key areas that the report examines. The first one that jumps out is data and understanding. It makes perfect sense that if you want to create a region where everyone can thrive, you first need to have a really clear picture of who you're talking about and the scale of the challenges they face.
Absolutely. Becoming an exemplary region has to begin with a deep dive into the data to truly grasp the current situation. And the report reveals some quite significant figures. For instance, did you know that around 26.7% of the population in the WMCA region, the roughly 780,000 people, identify as disabled?
Wow.
Interestingly, that's actually higher than the average across England.
Wow, that's a really substantial portion of our population. And it's not just about the number of people, is it? The report also highlights some really concerning inequalities, particularly when it comes to employment.
Yes. Sadly, the West Midlands has the second largest disability pay gap in England at 14.7% compared to the national average of 13.8%.
14.7%.
But what's perhaps even more troubling is that disabled employees in the West Midlands have the lowest average pay of any region in England, just £11.16 per hour, compared to the England average of £12.10.
Gosh.
These figures really underscore the urgency of the work this report is initiating.
They certainly do. And the report emphasizes a real need for better data collection in this area, doesn't it? To get a more accurate and nuanced understanding of the challenges.
It does. There's a strong push for more comprehensive and consistent ways of collecting and sharing disability-related data across the West Midlands. The report even mentions Birmingham City Council's ongoing work to establish more harmonized data standards as a really positive step in that direction.
Okay. And it's not just about the raw numbers, is it? There's a fundamental principle that the report advocates for wider adoption of, and that's the social model of disability. For our listener, can you just briefly explain what that entails and why it's so important in this context?
Absolutely. The social model essentially says that disability is caused by the way society is organized, rather than by a person's impairment or difference.
All right.
So instead of focusing on what an individual can't do, it looks at the barriers that society puts in their way, things like inaccessible buildings, discriminatory attitudes, or lack of appropriate support.
Makes sense.
This shift in perspective is really fundamental because it highlights that we need to change society, not try to fix individuals.
That makes perfect sense. So the focus shifts from the individual to the environment and societal structures. And a key recommendation to support this shift in understanding and to amplify the voices of disabled people is the idea of establishing a WM disability network.
Exactly. This network would provide a crucial platform for disabled people to connect, share their experiences, and directly influence the development and implementation of policies and practices across the region.
Right, giving people a real voice.
It's about ensuring that the voices of those with lived experience are central to this journey of change. So, improving our data and really embracing the social model requires a real collective commitment from all stakeholders, from local authorities and businesses to community groups and individuals.
Precisely. Now, moving on, another really critical area the report delves into is housing, with a clear ambition to create homes for everyone, housing that is not only safe and affordable, but also fully accessible to meet a diverse range of needs.
Which is such a fundamental aspect, isn't it? Having a secure and accessible home is the foundation upon which people can build their lives, access education, employment, and participate fully in their communities.
Absolutely.
Without that, the cycle of disadvantage can be incredibly difficult to break. The report highlights some really worrying statistics here, too. For instance, around 24% of adults with learning disabilities in the WMCA area are currently not living in stable and appropriate accommodation.
24%. That's a significant number of people whose basic needs aren't being met.
It really is.
That's a truly concerning figure. And I recall seeing something in the report about a potential significant shortfall in the provision of accessible housing for wheelchair users in the coming years.
You're right. The report projects a need for 11,425 wheelchair-accessible properties by the year 2040.
Okay.
However, based on current development plans, we're potentially only on track to deliver around 5,714 such properties by 2034.
So roughly half.
Yeah, a substantial gap, and it underscores the urgent need for action in this area.
So what are some of the key recommendations the report puts forward to try and address this significant challenge in housing?
There are a couple of really important ones. Firstly, the recommendation to establish a regional collaborative health and housing group. This would bring together key players from local authorities, public health bodies, the NHS, adult social care services, and housing developers to work together in a more coordinated way.
Getting everyone around the table.
Exactly. And secondly, the report proposes creating a WMCA-wide, accessible, and adaptable housing register. This would provide a clearer picture of the demand for accessible housing and help to better match individuals with suitable properties.
So better information flow.
It's about fostering that joined-up approach, where different sectors are communicating and working towards a common goal.
It really does sound like that collaborative approach, breaking down silos between different agencies, is going to be crucial across all of these areas. And that leads us to the next key area, employment and skills, with the very important goal of achieving jobs for everyone and significantly reducing that persistent disability pay gap we discussed earlier.
Absolutely. We've already seen how significant that pay gap is, and the report delves into some of the factors that contribute to this in terms of skills, and employment opportunities. For example, the report highlights that within the WMCA region, disabled people with special educational needs often experience lower academic attainment compared to their non-disabled peers, and even compared to the national average for students with SEN. This can unfortunately create barriers to accessing higher education and skilled employment.
Understandable.
Additionally, while it's encouraging that the WMCA region has a significant number of disability confident accredited organizations, over 800 at the time of the report, this hasn't yet translated into the kind of substantial increase in employment rates for disabled people that we need to see.
So, despite some positive initiatives, there's still a significant gap between being disability confident and actually creating truly inclusive employment opportunities. What are some of the key actions the report suggests in this area?
One key recommendation is to establish a regional voluntary employer disability commitment. This would encourage businesses across the West Midlands to actively pledge and work towards reducing the disability employment and pay gaps within their own organizations and more broadly across the region.
Kind of like a public promise.
Exactly. The report also proposes the development of a regional workplace adjustment passport.
Ah, yes. Tell me more about that.
The idea behind this is to create a portable record of the specific adjustments and support an individual with a disability needs in the workplace. This would make it much easier for disabled employees to transition between different roles or employers without having to repeatedly explain their needs and go through lengthy assessment processes each time.
That sounds like a really practical and potentially impactful initiative, the Workplace Adjustment Passport, to help smooth those transitions and ensure continuity of support.
Mm-hmm.
It really underscores how creating those inclusive employment opportunities requires a real joined-up effort, not just from employers, but also from educational institutions in equipping people with skills, and from support organizations in helping them to navigate the world of work.
Precisely. And then we move on to the area of journeys, which focuses on the vital aspiration of journeys for everyone, ensuring that disabled people can travel around the West Midlands region safely, reliably, and with the same level of confidence as anyone else.
This is something that often comes up in discussions about accessibility and inclusion, isn't it? The practical challenges and anxieties that can be associated with simply getting from one place to another.
It's a really significant barrier for many. The report highlights that currently, disabled people account for less than 9% of all journeys made within the WMCA region, which really indicates a significant issue with accessibility or confidence in using transport.
Less than 9%, that's low.
It is. Furthermore, many disabled people report experiencing considerable anxiety when using public transport due to concerns about accessibility, reliability, and the availability of assistance. The report also points out that over 28% of disabled households in the West Midlands do not have access to a car or van, making them particularly reliant on accessible public transport and infrastructure.
So, for a significant portion of the disabled population, accessible and reliable transport isn't just a convenience, it's absolutely essential for their independence and participation in daily life. What are some of the key recommendations to address these challenges in journeys?
The report recommends embedding the principles of inclusive design into all future transport planning from the very outset.
Building it in from the start.
Exactly. This means thinking about the needs of everyone, including disabled people, right at the initial stages of designing transport infrastructure and services. There's also a proposal to develop a transport design and inclusivity charter, which would set out clear standards and commitments for accessible transport across the region.
Okay, a set of standards.
Additionally, the report suggests exploring practical measures like providing free transport for essential carers and removing time restrictions on disabled people's bus passes to provide greater flexibility and support.
Again, it really emphasizes that collaborative approach, doesn't it? Bringing together transport planners, the transport providers themselves, and health and social care services to really understand the diverse needs of disabled people and to design and deliver services that meet those needs effectively.
Absolutely. And the final key area we'll touch on today is health, social care, and well-being. The report rightly emphasizes that health and well-being are not isolated issues, but rather cross-cutting themes that are significantly impacted by inequalities in all those other areas we've been discussing: housing, employment, and journeys.
That makes perfect sense. If someone is facing daily challenges with insecure housing, unemployment, or the inability to travel easily, it's inevitably going to have a knock-on effect on their overall health and well-being, both physically and mentally.
Exactly. The data within the report clearly illustrates this. It shows that disabled people in the West Midlands unfortunately score worse on pretty much all key indicators of well-being when compared to their non-disabled counterparts.
That's worrying.
There's also a concerningly higher rate of loneliness reported among disabled people in the region compared to both non-disabled people locally and to disabled people nationally. And perhaps most worryingly, the report highlights that disability-free life expectancy in the West Midlands is actually getting worse.
Getting worse.
Yes, which is a really concerning trend that needs to be urgently addressed.
Those are really stark and concerning trends that underscore the interconnectedness of all these different areas. So, what kind of recommendations does the report offer to try and improve these health and social care outcomes?
The report suggests exploring the delivery of more proactive annual health checks that are specifically designed to identify and address issues like social isolation and mental health challenges, as well as physical health needs.
More preventative care.
Exactly. There's also a strong emphasis on prioritizing person-centered care, ensuring that services are tailored to the individual's needs and preferences. And finally, the report recommends improving the standards and accessibility of information within health and social care services so that everyone can easily access the information they need in a format they can understand.
Clear communication is key.
This really requires a regional, cross-sector effort involving all relevant stakeholders to work together and improve these vital outcomes.
So as we've explored these key areas, it's become really clear that this report isn't presenting a set of quick fixes. As we said right at the beginning, it's fundamentally about marking the beginning of a really crucial and long-term journey towards making the West Midlands an exemplary region for disabled people.
Absolutely. And that point about it being the beginning really can't be overstated. This isn't something that the WMCA can achieve in isolation.
No, definitely not.
It truly requires a collective effort where everyone, every organization, every community group, and every individual recognizes their part in this shared ambition. Think back to that jigsaw puzzle analogy. Every single piece, including you as a listener, is vital to completing the picture.
That's the core message we want to leave you with. The WMCA is demonstrating its commitment by initiating this report and outlining these opportunities and recommendations. They're committed to keeping the conversation going, continuing to listen and learn, and working to secure firm commitments and buy-in from right across the West Midlands. The next steps that the report outlines include seeking formal approval from the WMCA's governance structures, and establishing a dedicated cross-stakeholder WMCA implementation group to really drive this work forward and ensure that these recommendations are put into action.
And it's important to be realistic. The report acknowledges that some of these recommendations will require additional funding and resources, which will need to be explored and secured.
Sure, funding is always a factor.
But equally, there are many other things that can be achieved through a shared commitment to changing existing practices, adopting more inclusive attitudes, and simply working together in a more coordinated way. The ultimate vision, as the report so clearly articulates, is of a West Midlands, where every single person has the opportunity to thrive, free from the barriers that currently exist, and where the diverse experiences and perspectives of disabled people are not just valued, but actively empowered and celebrated.
So, as you've been listening to this deep dive, we really want to encourage you to think about your own role in this collective journey. How can you, in your own sphere of influence, whether as an individual, as part of an organization, or within your local community, contribute to making this vision a reality?
Yeah.
What's one small, or perhaps not so small, step that you or your organization could take to help make the West Midlands an exemplary region for disabled people?
That's the crucial question for all of us to consider. Because while this report provides a vital foundation and a clear roadmap, achieving a truly exemplary region demands a sustained and collaborative effort from each and every one of us who call the West Midlands home.
And on that note, it really makes you think, what one practical change could you or your community implement today to contribute to a more inclusive West Midlands for disabled people? Take some time to reflect on those opportunities for action we've discussed, and consider how we can all be active participants in building that truly exemplary region piece by piece together.